It's got to be one of the most incredible stories in all of world history. I mean, think about it. A single corporation, a business started by merchants in London, ends up ruling an entire subcontinent. Not a kingdom, not a nation, a company. So today, we're going to unpack how the British East India Company pulled off what is, without a doubt, the ultimate corporate takeover.
So that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? How on earth does a business that's supposed to be trading in spices and textiles, how does that transform into a military and political powerhouse that can topple the Mughal Empire and conquer powerful Indian kingdoms? It seems impossible. All right, let's get right into it.
So you might think the story kicks off with cannons and armies, but you'd be wrong. It actually starts with something way more familiar: fierce business competition. Back in the 16th and 17th centuries, every major European power was desperate to get a slice of India's incredibly rich trade, and they were more than willing to fight for it.
Now here's something that's really important to remember. The British were actually late to the party. The Portuguese beat them by over 100 years when Vasco da Gama found that sea route way back in 1498. The English East India Company only gets its charter in 1600, and hot on their heels are the Dutch just 5 years later. So right from the get-go, this was a crowded, high-stakes game.
And believe me, this competition was anything but friendly. The Portuguese, since they were there first, came up with this system called the cartaz. Basically, they used their powerful navy to muscle other ships into buying a license just to trade in the Indian Ocean. It was a really early sign that, for these European powers, trade and military force were always going to be two sides of the same coin.
So while the Portuguese and the Dutch were big players early on, the real epic struggle for control of India boiled down to a global rivalry between two 18th-century superpowers, Britain and France. And their fight for global dominance was going to have its main event right there on Indian soil.
So you've got these two heavyweights. In one corner, the British East India Company, with ambitious, ruthless guys like Robert Clive. And in the other, the French East India Company, led by the incredibly sharp political operator, Governor-General Dupleix. You could argue the French were actually the first to really push for territory, but both sides were using local Indian politics like a giant chessboard. This whole showdown became known as the Carnatic Wars, fought down in southern India.
And after 3 absolutely brutal wars that dragged on for almost 20 years, the British came out on top. That third war was the real knockout blow. The Battle of Wandy Wash in 1760 completely shattered French power in India. And just like that, the company's biggest European rival was off the board, leaving a wide-open path for British expansion. Okay, so with the French gone, the company turned its attention to the biggest prize on the subcontinent: Bengal. This was, by far, the richest province in all of India. Getting control of it wouldn't just be a victory, it would be a total game changer. This is the exact moment the company's entire mission pivots, from pure business to outright conquest. What happens next is just a stunning chain reaction. It starts when the local ruler, the Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah, tries to push back against the company's growing influence. The British, led again by Robert Clive, hit back hard. But here's the thing. Their deadliest weapon wasn't their cannons, it was conspiracy. Clive cut a secret deal with the Nawab's own top general, a guy named Mir Jafar. So at the decisive Battle of Plassey, Mir Jafar and his huge chunk of the army just stood there. They did nothing. The British won a shockingly easy victory, and a few years later, the Battle of Buxar proved it wasn't a fluke. Their military was now the dominant force in the region.
And that victory led to the ultimate prize. The Mughal emperor, who was pretty weak by this point, gave the company the Diwani of Bengal. Now, you have to understand this term. Diwani meant the company now had the official legal right to collect all the taxes from the massive, wealthy population of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa.
And this right here, this is the moment everything changed. Suddenly, the company could use India's own money to pay for its own armies, to buy Indian goods to ship back to Britain, and to run its entire administration. It became a self-financing machine for conquest. The merchant had officially become the ruler.
So now the company is basically a state, funded by its own Indian territory. What do they do next? They begin a systematic, absolutely ruthless campaign to bring the rest of the great Indian kingdoms under their thumb, picking them off one by one.
Their first real test came from the south, from the powerful kingdom of Mysore. And as you can see here, this was no easy fight. Led by the brilliant Hyder Ali and his even more famous son, Tipu Sultan, Mysore put up an incredible, fierce resistance that lasted for decades.
It took the British 4 separate, bloody wars to finally defeat them, and it only ended when Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore, was killed in battle in 1799.
And this chart, wow, it really puts the sheer scale of this conquest into perspective, doesn't it? I mean, look at that. 4 wars just to take down Mysore, but they were just getting started. Next, the company went after the Marathas, a huge confederacy that controlled most of central and western India. That took 3 more brutal wars. And finally, up in the north, they fought 2 wars to crush the powerful Sikh Empire. It was a methodical, one-by-one takedown of every major power on the subcontinent.
So the final pieces of the puzzle were the Marathas and the Sikhs. After 3 really hard-fought wars, the Maratha power was broken, and the very last act was the conquest of the mighty Sikh Empire in the Punjab. Once they fell in 1849, there were no major Indian powers left standing. And as the ultimate symbol of this total victory, the British took the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond right from this Sikh treasury.
So winning battles is one thing, but how does a private company actually govern a population of hundreds of millions? Well, they developed some absolutely brilliant and often very sinister political tools to lock down their control without having to directly rule every square inch of land. One of their most ingenious inventions was something called the subsidiary alliance. It sounds kind of harmless, like a partnership, right? But really, it was a trap. Here's how it worked. An Indian ruler would sign a treaty asking for British protection. In exchange, they had to let British troops be stationed in their territory and pay for them out of their own pocket and give up all control over their foreign policy. And this system spread like wildfire. Just look at this list. Huge, powerful states like Hyderabad and even Mysore, after they were defeated, were all forced into this system. It was an absolutely genius way for the company to neutralize any potential threats and control huge territories without all the cost and hassle of ruling them directly.
So what's the bottom line here? This policy completely hollowed out the power of local Indian rulers. Sure, they got to keep their fancy titles and live in their palaces, but their real independence, it was gone. They were now just puppets, dependent parts of a massive British empire, all run by a board of directors back in London.
And so we end right back where we started. From just a handful of merchants trying to make a profit to the absolute rulers of an empire. You see, the story of the East India Company is so much more than just a history lesson. It's a chilling case study. It shows us what can happen when commercial ambition is armed with military power and isn't held in check by any government. The line between a corporation and a state can get blurry, and then it can just disappear entirely. It really makes you ask, what is the ultimate relationship between profit and power?